What if something this old, this simple, could bring her own struggling garden back to life? Every gardener knows the heartbreak of lifeless soil. You do everything right, water regularly, apply expensive fertilizers, monitor sun exposure. Yet nothing seems to grow. Seeds vanish, leaves yellow, roots stall. The soil feels hard, tired, maybe even hopeless. But what if your soil isn't dead, just starving? That's what my grandmother discovered, quite by accident, on a trip to Japan after retiring. In a quiet community garden outside Kyoto, she watched an old farmer pour a cloudy, sour-smelling liquid onto his vegetable beds. It wasn't a fertilizer. It wasn't even store-bought. It was something ancient, simple, and surprisingly powerful: fermented rice water. She brought the idea home, not expecting much, and ended up reviving her struggling garden with nothing more than a mason jar and a handful of uncooked rice. Within weeks, her soil had changed. So had she. As it turns out, this isn't folk wisdom. It's microbiology. And today, scientists across the globe are beginning to rediscover what traditional farmers knew all along. When you feed the soil remembers how to live. So what is this ancient liquid? Why does it work so well? And how can you make it yourself? Let's dig in. At first glance, your soil might look fine. It's dark, it crumbles in your hand. Maybe it even came from a bag labeled organic garden mix. But appearances can be deceiving, because even the richest looking dirt can be biologically dead. Healthy soil isn't just particles of sand, silt, and clay. It's a living system. A single handful of fertile soil should contain billions of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and other microscopic organisms. These tiny workers are what digest organic matter, unlock nutrients, build humus, and form natural glues that hold soil together. But modern practices, especially chemical fertilizers, have taken a toll. Decades of applying synthetic nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, NPK, bypassed the soil's living network and fed plants directly. Over time, this nutrient shortcut left microbial communities undernourished, out of balance, or wiped out entirely. The soil might still grow something, but it no longer regenerates. It no longer breathes. It no longer buffers disease. As the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS, now states, soil health is rooted in soil biology. Without a thriving microbial ecosystem, soil becomes a passive medium, something plants endure, not thrive in. Think of soil like a stomach. It's not enough to dump in nutrients and hope for the best. Just as your body needs enzymes, microbes, and probiotics to digest food properly, soil needs microbial life to digest organic matter and make minerals available to roots. Fertilizer alone is like swallowing a multivitamin without eating a single meal. This shift in perspective is what changed everything for my grandmother and for her garden. Because if the problem is biological, then the solution can't be chemical. It has to be biological, too. And that's where a simple, centuries-old liquid comes in. One that doesn't feed the plants directly, but brings life back to the soil itself. My grandmother's discovery didn't happen in a lab or on a gardening blog. It happened on a quiet morning in a Kyoto community garden. She was traveling through Japan after retiring, part sightseeing, part soul-searching. A longtime gardener, she made a habit of visiting local gardens wherever she went. But this one felt different. Rows of vegetables lined the beds, lush, vibrant, impossibly green. The soil looked rich, but not overly cultivated. And then she noticed something odd. A farmer, maybe in his 70s, was watering the plants. Not with a hose, not with compost tea, but with a cloudy liquid from a reused plastic jug. It had a faint sour smell, almost like yogurt, but thinner. She asked through a translator what it was. The man smiled and said simply, "Rice water, fermented. We don't feed the plants, we feed the soil." He explained it had been used in his family for generations. Collected from rinsing rice, left to ferment for a few days, then diluted and poured into the garden, not as fertilizer, but as food for the microbes beneath the surface. My grandmother was skeptical. Back home, garden solutions came in plastic bottles with barcodes and guarantees. This was wastewater. Leftovers. It didn't make sense. But there was something about the man's garden. The softness of the soil, the color of the leaves, the way it all felt alive. And more than that, there was something about the philosophy. A deep, cultural respect for soil not as dirt, but as a living thing. A partner. That day, she jotted a few notes, took a photo, and tucked the idea into the back of her travel journal. Just in case. Because as strange as it seemed, a quiet question had started to form. What if something this old, this simple, could bring her own struggling garden back to life? Back in Michigan, spring was slow to arrive. My grandmother's garden sat under a gray sky, just as lifeless as the season before. The soil was hard, cracked. It didn't absorb water, it repelled it. Nothing grew well, and even the few things that tried were quickly overrun by pests. But she remembered that old man in Kyoto, the cloudy jug, the way he said, feed the soil. So she gave it a try. She took a cup of uncooked rice, rinsed it gently in 2 cups of water, and poured the cloudy liquid into a clean mason jar. Loosely covered it, left on the counter. After 3 days, it smelled a little sour, like sourdough starter. A thin film had formed on top. That's how she knew it was ready. She diluted the mix, 1 part fermented rice water to 10 parts clean water, and poured it gently at the base of a few test plants. Just 1 bed. A quiet experiment. No announcements. Within 2 weeks, she noticed something strange. The soil under that test bed no longer felt crusty. It held moisture longer. The smell changed from dry dust to that sweet, earthy scent of real life. A few days later, she spotted new root shoots pushing out from the base of her lettuces. By the 6th week, she had undeniable proof. Half her garden, fed with fermented rice water, was thriving. The other half looked just as tired as before. Same seeds, same sun, same gardener. The only difference? What went into the soil? It was enough to make a believer out of anyone. Because the change wasn't just visible. It was measurable. And it all started with something she used to pour down the drain. As remarkable as her results were, they aren't isolated. Around the world, researchers are now catching up with what traditional farmers have practiced for generations. In Japan, fermented rice rinse water has been quietly used for decades to boost compost efficiency and soil microbial health. Smallholder farmers mix it with compost to activate the microbial process, speed up decomposition, and improve nutrient availability. It's low cost, accessible, and highly effective. In the U.S., the USDA's Agricultural Research Service, ARS, and the NRCS have been leading a push to rebuild soil health by focusing on biology, not just chemistry. According to USDA data, healthy soils with rich microbial diversity can retain up to 90% more water during dry periods and are more resistant to disease pressure. So what's going on here? It turns out fermentation multiplies beneficial microorganisms, especially lactic acid bacteria and wild yeasts, by the thousands. These microbes don't just sit in the soil. They work. They break down complex organic matter. They release minerals. They help bind soil particles into aggregates, improving both structure and moisture retention. In biological terms, they rebuild the soil food web, 1 teaspoon at a time. And the difference between plain rice water and fermented rice water is dramatic. One is a byproduct. The other is a living brew. Fermentation unlocks the real potential, activating microbial density and metabolic activity that plain rinse water simply can't match. So no, it's not magic. It's microbiology. And it's one of the simplest, most overlooked ways to bring life back into your soil without spending a dime on fertilizer. You don't need special tools, expensive ingredients, or even a green thumb to start this. All you need is a little rice, some water, and a bit of patience. Here's how to make fermented rice water at home. Take 1 cup of uncooked white rice. Brown rice works too. Rinse it gently in 2 to 3 cups of clean, chlorine-free water. Don't scrub, just swish to release starch. Pour the cloudy water into a clean glass jar. Cover it loosely with a lid or cloth. Let it sit at room temperature for 2 to 3 days. You'll know it's ready when you notice a slightly sour smell, maybe a thin white film on the surface. That's lactic acid bacteria doing their work. If it smells rotten, or has green mold. Toss it and start over. When it's ready, dilute it. Mix 1 part fermented rice water with 10 parts clean water. Water the base of your plants, not the leaves, every 2 to 3 weeks during the growing season. For best results, combine with compost or mulch. The added organic material feeds microbes and holds moisture longer. And yes, it works beautifully in raised beds, pots, and flower borders too. You don't have to treat your whole garden. Not yet. Start with 1 row, 1 pot, 1 jar. Track what you notice. Changes in smell, soil texture, leaf color, root growth. You'll be amazed at how quickly the soil responds. And remember, you're not just watering. You're seeding life. Because even a single jar can wake up a bed of tired soil and teach you something in the process. Before this, gardening had always been a kind of battle. You fight weeds. You fight bugs. You fight the soil when it gets stubborn or dry. But something shifted when my grandmother began working with fermented rice water. She stopped managing the land and started listening to it. It changed her rhythm. She moved slower, observed more, dug less. She started seeing soil not as dirt, but as something alive, something that could be healed, not fixed. And she wasn't alone. One of her neighbors, a retired school teacher, tried it on a patch of beans that hadn't produced in years. She called back 2 weeks later, laughing. They've never looked so green. Another man down the street, a veteran, poured it into his front flower beds just to see what would happen. That summer, his roses bloomed harder and longer than he'd ever seen. He left a note in her mailbox. You gave me back my soil. What fermented rice water brought wasn't just fertility. It was dignity. It reminded people that nature wants to heal if we let it. It's easy to forget in the rush of gardening catalogs and soil tests and Pinterest advice that nature already knows how to take care of itself. All we have to do is create the conditions. When we feed the soil, not just the plant, the soil feeds everything else. Plants, pollinators, even our own peace of mind. In the end, it's not just gardening. It's partnership. So much of modern gardening is about adding more. More products, more chemicals, more promises. But sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is go back to what's simple, to what works, to what's alive. Fermented rice water isn't new. It isn't flashy. It doesn't come with a marketing budget. But it works because it restores the one thing your soil might be missing, microbial life. It's not a shortcut. It's a return to the idea that soil is alive. That waste can be nourishment. That what we pour down the drain might hold the key to bringing a garden back to life. My grandmother no longer digs beds like she used to, but she still keeps a small jar of rice water fermenting by her kitchen sink. Every Saturday, she walks out to her roses, pours a little at the base, and smiles. She once told me, looking at a bed of dahlias in full bloom, they call it wastewater. I call it a second chance for the soil and for me. So try it. Just once. Share it if it works. Let the soil speak again. You might be surprised what it says.